This is part 3 of 7 in the Enhancing EQuiS Reports series. Today's presentation will be demonstration heavy, and I will take any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. Let me begin by sharing with you some information that is specific to this presentation. I will be using EQuiS 641 with a standard licensing package. You can utilize any EQuiS licensing package to use the charts feature in EQuiS. And just as a side note, I will be working with a SQL-based database. In order to use the charts in EQuiS, you must first run a report. Choosing the best report for retrieving your data from the database is very important when it comes to graphically displaying your data. Next, you will select which chart will best display the information you retrieve from your database. In EQuiS, you have 3 chart options: an XY chart, a trend, and an XYZ chart. After selecting the appropriate chart type, you will then configure which fields you would like to utilize in your series. Finally, you will add your series, or in other words, you will let EQuiS know that you are ready to display your graph. Last, but certainly not least, you will modify your graph's appearance to your specifications. For the demonstration portion of today's presentation, I will run 3 different reports and utilize 2 chart types to show you how each chart works in the context of your report. But before we begin with the demonstration, I would like to introduce the Whitney metal plating site. I will be using this fictional facility for today's presentation. Now, let's travel back in time to the site's assessment. Okay, for the sake of our demonstration today, let us say that as a precaution we installed monitoring wells across the site, and ever so often we need to determine if there's been an exceedance for any of our analytes of interest. So I will begin by first running the beta action level exceedance with parameters report. As you can see from my parameters, I'm running this from January to March 1997. I only want reportable results. I'm running it for a very simplified action limit. This is just for today's presentation. And I only want to show values that are an exceedance. So let's go ahead and run this report. Okay, these values look pretty good. I'm going to run an XY chart. Now, for my chart, I want my x-axis to be my well locations, and I want my report results to be my y-axis. Additionally, I want each chart to be a different chemical name. So let's start by making this modification. My x-axis will be sample load code, system load code. Y-axis is fine, and I want to group my charts by chemical name. Okay, let's go ahead and add our series. Oh, you know what? This isn't quite right. I want it to look a little different. So let's remove that and add the series as a bar instead. This will look much better. Oh, this is perfect. Okay, and as you can see, these are my report result values for benzene, TCE, and vinyl chloride per sampling location. Now let's just focus on the benzene chart. This chart does not necessarily display the information I want to show. I also want to show that each of these values is an exceedance. So I'm going to add an action level. So I'll go to my y-axis and add my action level, but I don't want to add it as a bar. I want to add it as a line. That looks pretty good. And there it is for TCE and vinyl chloride. Okay. I really want this to look a little bit better. I feel like this axis could be a little bit more cleaned up, and these titles could also be a little bit more defined. So let's begin by going to the Advanced tab and going to Axes. My left axis looks like it is in increments of 2. So let's change that to increments of 10. Yeah, that looks much better, way more cleaned up. Let's change this title too. Okay, I think that looks much better. Let's go ahead and go to our bottom axis now. Now I don't want to change the values for this axis or the incrementation, but I do want to change the way these labels are positioned. So let's make them all horizontal. Okay. And one thing I notice is that for my legend, my report result value is different colors per location, and that's fine. I think it gives a really good visual element, but my legend appears to be incorrect. So let's just make a slight modification here. Let's add a title to our legend. Okay. Now let's remove report result value, and let's change the name for this aspect of our legend. So we'll go to series, bar and line. So I want to remove report result value. I'll go to show in legend, false. Okay. Now let's modify this action level title. Okay, I think that looks really good. All right, now let's move on to our next part of the demonstration. Let's say that our hydrologist is out sick, and I need a quick refresher on which direction our groundwater is moving across the site, because I'm putting together our plan of action for how we intend on remediating the site, since it's obvious, thanks to our handy chart right here, that there's been an exceedance at our site, and we want to implement a plan. So I'm going to run the water levels extra fields chart. I'm going to do this from early 1996 to the later part of 1997, and I just want my water level elevation. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and this time I want to run the XYZ chart. These default values in here are pretty good. I think I just want to add one more thing. Sysloop code labels, and let's just run a contour real fast and see what this looks like. Okay, this looks all right. It gives you a pretty good representation of which direction the groundwater is moving across the site. Here are all of my testing locations, but I think I want something a little bit more visual just to pass on. And since it won't take very much time, let's just run a surface plot. Oh yeah, that looks really good. Pretty fancy. But I think that some of our colleagues might not be able to see reds and yellows, and we don't really have an accurate way, unless you're actually looking at this on the screen, of describing what each of these colors mean in terms of your water level elevations or your groundwater elevations. So let's add a legend. Okay, there's our legend. Let's just add a title. All right. Now, let's help our friends that have a little bit better taste in color schemes. And let's change our palette style. Now, looking at this chart, I want to make sure that my areas where my groundwater elevation is highest is dark, and I want my areas where it's lowest light. So I'm going to change the palette style to inverted gray. Okay. One more thing, I really want this title to describe what we're looking at. Surface plot could mean a lot of things, but we want this to basically be a representation of our groundwater elevations. And let's change our sub header as well. Okay, I think this is a much more accurate representation of what's going on at our site. And just as a note too, I can copy this as an image and just pop it into an email, or I can add it to Surfer or to Google Earth. All right. Now let's flash forward to the early 2000s. And let's just say, for our purposes here today, that we picked a cheap, cutting edge, and very, very effective remediation treatment for the Whitney site. And now we want to see how we're doing when it comes to our analyte of interest, our main one, TCE. So I'm going to run one of my favorite reports, the Analytical and Water Results Report. I'm going to run this for one location for 2000 to 2002 for my groundwater results. Focusing on TCE as my analyte. I only want to see values with detect flags of yes and reportable results. For the water level aspect of the report, I am matching my analytical results date parameters, and I'm also just going to look at water level elevations. Okay, this looks pretty good. And I just want to show you this part of the report real fast. As you can see, this report and the chemical name includes TCE and then my water level information here as well in that field. So keep that in mind. We're going to go back to our old friend, the X and Y chart. Since I ran this report for a specific location and I have many analytes in my report, I want to group my series by chemical name. And let's see. I think that this should be good to run. Okay, that looks pretty good. You notice though that in my report that I had several chemical name fields such as measured depth of well, was blank in my report. So I want to kind of clean this up. I want to clean up my legend and I want to make this look a little bit better so that I can show that my groundwater elevation and my results for benzene are on the same graph. So let's go ahead and just remove some of these values. All right. I want to clean up that legend a little bit. So let's go to series. And I want to remove all these blank values. I've already shown you how to do this, but another handy trick, you remove it from your legend, But then I don't want to continue working around these members, so I just go ahead and remove the ones that I don't want to see and I don't want to work with in the future. And you can add them back if you decide that you want to add a field to your legend, or if you want to change its look. I want to keep exact elevation, but let's change this a little bit. And since I'm working with one axis, I want to be sure to include my units, just so other folks don't get confused. Now this may seem a little tedious, but you think about it, it's pretty fast, and I only have to do it once. Here's our TCE. Almost there. Okay, perfect. All right, let's change our axes now. Let's start with the left axis. I want to change the increments for this axis. So let's go ahead and change this to values of 20. Also, let's change our min and max values for this axis. I definitely want it to start at 0. And I want our maximum value to be 200, just to give this a little bit more room up here. Okay, let's also change this title too. Okay, let's change our bottom axis now. This looks very busy down here, so let's also change the increments there. Let's click on standard, and let's only show every 3 months. That looks much more cleaned up. I want to change those labels too. Yeah, and the title. All right, that looks pretty good. Although you notice that I have a value right here missing for this water level, so let's kind of move this axis a little over. Oh, that looks good. Okay, I like that much better. But I want to see where my data points are on this line, because right now there's no indication where our data points are. And I want to be sure that my decreasing TCE levels are not due to my fluctuations in my water table. So let's go to series. And go to pointer. Down triangle. Yeah, I think that would be good. That's normally how we describe water table levels. Okay, and let's change the pointer for my second line. Let's pick circle. Now I can see my data points. This looks pretty good. One last thing. Perfect. And if you like this style, you can just go ahead and save your template and use it in the future for when you have similar charts. All right, so a quick review of today's demonstration. When you want to utilize the EQuIS Charts interface, you need to first run a report, select a chart, configure your data for that chart, add your series, modify the way that you view your chart, and then you also have the option to save your template. I just want to highlight some of the things that we cover today. You can change your data point shape and also add it to your series. You can change your axis configuration by changing your increments. You can change the min and max values of your series. You can add an action level to your XY charts. You can add a legend. It's very useful. For your XYZ charts, you can change the palette style. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending, and I will take any questions you may have now.
Is there a way to publish the charts? Because I think that a casual user might have a learning curve, but if there was like a pre-canned way of them seeing the graphical presentation of some of this data without having to do the setup work?
I think the best way to answer that question would be is if you as an administrator have gone into the report and you know what your charts, how you want them to be presented and how you want them to look, you can save your template. So you can save your template and then you can have your user configure the chart. They would still need to follow through on configuring their x-axis and y-axis for their series, but then they would be able to use that template to kind of give it a consistent style.
And can you export any of this to Excel charts?
Let me see. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So you just, because obviously you just need to right-click and then go to Send To.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for attending. Goodbye.